buyer consultation. Thanks. So tonight we're going to be going over the buyer consultation and just getting prepared for that, and also going over the forms that you're going to need for that. So I'm just going to start by showing you a couple resources that we have. Hi, Ryan. And Ryan, our friendly lender on here. So if we have any lending questions, which we typically do on these classes. Anything you want to share with us while I'm pulling up my screen, Ryan? Any exciting news?
Exciting news, huh? Well,
Anything in the lending world
nothing,
we need to know about?
no, but I did. If any of you guys are in the Discord, hopefully all of you, I sent over a pre-approval video that helps a ton, especially as a new agent. I know a lot of the time that's kind of an uncomfortable transition from you as the agent to me as the lender. So it breaks down the pre-approval process, disarms them, kind of addresses some misconceptions and whatnot. So if you didn't see that, check it out, save it. I would just send it to any of your buyers as you're having conversations with them. It makes the transition a lot easier.
I love that. Thank you. I did see, I was in a meeting and my Discord was going nuts, but I didn't get to read it. So that's awesome. And that's perfect material for this class.
Sweet. Oh, is
So
it
first,
buyer consult? Perfect.
yeah,
Okay.
yep, buyer consult. So the first thing I want to show you guys is we do have this PC material library. So when you are taking on a new buyer, just know that we do have this kind of a checklist for you. So if you just come down here, what I'm going to be talking about today is taking on new buyers. So if you click on this, it kind of just gives you just a quick rundown of you're going on an appointment with the buyer. These are the documents that you're going to need. Getting your consultation packet ready. Here is one version of them. This is a Canva design. I'm going to show you a different one, but it doesn't necessarily matter which presentation you are using. What matters is that you have one that will keep you on track, so that when you are sitting down with them, you're covering the exact same thing with every single buyer. That's kind of the key. And then here's just some extra videos in case you need anything on what we talk about tonight. So this is kind of a good resource to follow back up on. The other thing that I would show you is the KW Home Hub. So does everybody have access to this? And this is,
I believe I do.
Yes.
I haven't tried, but yes.
okay. So you definitely want to get in here and play around. This is the newest version. So if you have not signed up, it's just going to ask you to create an account. So just a login and password, and then you'll get access to this. So this is where kind of all things KW Home Hub sit. So you have like, here's your Gmail login. So I kind of created this as just my dashboard. So here's the MLS, here's our master training calendar. You have your command login, DocuSign. So kind of you just work from this. Where I'm going to spend some time tonight is in this Design My Marketing Suite. So what I love best about this package, other than it's just beautiful, is, and we're also going to spend time on the do-it-yourself marketing. So we lead with revenue until we all start making money. We can just use the stuff that's already created for us. So you're going to click on Get Started, and we're going to spend time in the buyer packet today. So you get to choose out of these three kind of looks. Doesn't really matter. Content is all the same. It's just what look do you like? And then you just click to edit buyer's guide. So your first piece of homework from today's class is to come in here and design your buyer guide. If I am 100% convinced, if I were to give you a buyer tonight and I was to hand this package to you, you would be able to get through a presentation fairly well without practice. So that's the point of this. It gives you a lot of confidence. It gives you the content you need to get through a presentation. And the piece specifically that I'm going to go over tonight is the process. So if you look at this, we're just going to go over this home buyer's roadmap. So I'm going to make this a little bit bigger so you guys can see it. So here is the piece of this package that I take to every single one of my buyer appointments. You're also going to, so you're going to include this. You're also going to include the forms that I just went over that we'll go over at the end of this. And then I also have just what I call like a buyer info sheet or a buyer take-in sheet. And that really is a place for me to take notes as I'm talking to the buyer. So you definitely want something like that. This is the one-page presentation. So when I'm meeting with a buyer, I basically will say, great, the next step is let's get together so I can show you how I am going to help you either save money, find the best house, whatever the case may be. They could be first-time home buyers. I say, oh, great, I have this awesome first-time home buyer program. I'd like to sit down and go over it with you. And they get this presentation. If they're maybe they're looking into building wealth and they want to buy an investment property, I'm like, oh my gosh, I have the best investor program. I'd love to get together and talk to you about it. This is the same presentation. If I have somebody that's purchased a home 10 times, they've lived in 10 states, and they think they know everything about buying a home, I'm going to say, oh my gosh, I have the best move up program. I'd love to get with you. And they're going to get this exact same presentation. So what I can tell you about being prepared and doing this presentation is I recently just met with a buyer, and she's one of those that has purchased 10, 15 homes in her life. By the time I was done with my presentation, not only was she super eager and excited to sign my buyer broker, she literally said to me, she said, I've purchased 10 to 20 homes and not one person has ever explained the actual process to me. So this is going to make you stand out above everybody else because people don't do this. It makes getting a contract signed a whole lot easier. And this is your place to really be able to set up expectations and help them understand what's going to happen. How much money do they need? How much is an inspection? What does earnest money mean? So it's all about setting those expectations. And this one page is going to do that for you. So I basically, you're going to build rapport with them. Obviously, you're going to chat with them a little bit. Tell me about yourself. Oh my gosh, tell me about your kids. Tell me about your work. Like, get to know them. You maybe already know them or maybe you don't. And then I just say, okay, thank you for joining me tonight. I really just wanted to show you my first time home buyer program, my investor program, whatever you're calling it. I just wanted to show you how I work with people and my process. So step number one, and as you're taking notes, I'm going to give you kind of my scripting as we go through this. So step number one is finding an agent. And this is where I was saying, if you literally read these words, you will get through a presentation. But the way that I add to these, I say, finding an agent is the first step. So hopefully by the end of tonight, you're going to feel comfortable hiring me as your agent. The scripting I use is I say, according to Utah code, our agency must be in writing. So that's the key point. So according to Utah code, our agency must be in writing. So at the end of my presentation tonight, I am going to ask you to sign a document hiring me as your agent. Now, what could happen? I don't know how you guys feel about that. I think Cody's had these filled out before. I'm not sure, Michelle, if you have, but when you hear the word contract, you kind of get a little bit nervous. You get nervous. The person you're sitting with is going to get nervous. So I like to get that out of the way first. Hey, I'm going to ask you to sign a contract tonight. And they could get a little bit nervous, a little on edge, whatever. And then we're going to go show our value through the rest of the presentation. And then we're going to ask them to sign the contract. So it kind of gets that out of the way. Like, yep, we're going to sign a contract at the end of this.
I always remind them also that if it comes to a situation where we're like, they don't want to be under agency under me, then I'll tear up that contract too. I'm really big about that part with them too. Like, hey, if we're not feeling each other, now I do go into detail. I tell them like, hey, if we have a pending deal, I've worked my ass off, I'm sticking to the contract. But everything before that time, I got no problem like ripping it up and letting you do you. So just to kind of give them that added feeling factor,
Yes. Yeah, and you definitely can do that. I phrase it a little bit differently. I say something like, I have 100% satisfaction guarantee. If at any point you decide to change your mind or, we're not jiving together, we're having a hard time working together, then, there is a way to get out of this contract. You just have to be very careful saying that unless, because there could be a point where they're like, Cody said he'd rip this up at any time. And it's really hard for our brokers to back us if that were the case, if you were under contract or something. So you definitely want to make them, I've said that many times, like, look, I'll rip this thing up at any point. And when it comes to it and you're under contract and they're like, you said you'd rip this up. So you have to be very careful with that. So I have like toned it down a little just to say I have 100% satisfaction guarantee. I live on referrals. I want to make sure you have the very best experience. And by working with me, that's going to happen. If you're ever not happy, I definitely want, a chance to fix that and we'll work it out, sort of like that, something like that. So you definitely want to make them feel good about it. Step number 2. So then I just tell them the next step is we want to make sure that your financials are in order to purchase a home. So now is the time that I want to get you pre-approved with a lender and find out, because sometimes they'll say, oh, I've been to a bank, I'm pre-approved, or they're not really sure what that means. Or they say, my credit's not in great shape, or, I haven't saved enough money for a down payment. This is when they're going to talk to you about their financials. And I just help them understand, look, we have to make sure that you're 100% ready to go. I have awesome people I would have you talk to. And the reason we're doing this is because if we go out and we find your dream home and you want to write up an offer, every seller expects us to submit a pre-approval letter. And if we're not ready, you could lose that house. So you do want to give them a little reason behind why that is. Another reason I tell them, I don't want to take you out and show you a whole bunch of homes for 600,000. You fall in love with them. And then we find out you're only qualified for 400,000. You will never fall in love with a $400,000 house after you've seen 10 $600,000 houses. So you really just help them understand, like, this literally is one of the very first steps in making sure they're comfortable with their payment, making sure their credit's in order, making sure they're good with their down payment. And then at this point, I just refer them to the people that I work with. So it's also your chance to kind of just keep that control within our team. That makes the whole process go smoother if you know who you're dealing with. So I just find out, hey, can I have Ryan give you a call? When would be a good time for him to call you? Are you easier in the mornings? Is it easier to get you in the afternoons? And then I just give him a heads up. Great. I'm going to have Ryan from Cross Country Mortgage. He's going to be calling you tomorrow at 5 p.m. Make sure you take his call. And then make sure you give that to the lender that you want to refer them to. And then Ryan, I don't know if you're still listening. Is there anything you want to add on pre-approval?
No, that's great. I think just setting the expectation. A lot of people think that this, I guess, step is a huge commitment, and it really isn't. Like, it is completely cost-free. There's no obligation. There's no commitment. We always start with soft pulls on credit. So there's literally only value to gain. And if you understand that as an agent, you'll have no issues actually getting your agent or your client over to a lender, because they are not a serious deal or transaction or client if you do not have them converted on the financial side. So
yeah,
it's super important, and you can completely lower the bar by understanding that and knowing that it's not some big commitment, some huge step that they have no way of getting out of.
Yep. I love that. And also, I would say some scripting on that too is people may or may not think that they're ready. Like, oh, I'm in a lease for 4 months, or I signed a lease for 6 months, or, I have half my down payment ready. I just let them know, look, sometimes you're ready sooner than you think, and sometimes it's going to take you longer than you think to get ready. So I love that you reminded us this isn't a big commitment. It really is a consultation to get them ready to buy a home. And they'll be surprised one way or another. They'll either think, oh my gosh, the bank told me I could get 600,000. And now, the lender's telling me I can only get 500,000. Like, it's super important that we know exactly where they are.
Yeah, for sure. And to your point, I have applications that I had started with the client 2 years ago, and one of them is just now going under contract. But they had so many things that they needed to work through that they wouldn't have known how to get through themselves. But because they started sooner rather than later, they probably sped up their timeline by at least a couple years by working with experts and actually starting the process.
Yep. Yeah, totally. I see that all the time where people are just like, oh yeah, I'll be ready. I can do it tomorrow. And then they're like, oh, no, you have a lot to do. So very important step.
One thing that,
yeah.
well, you had mentioned Ryan will give you a call. So it's like you're going to pass their information to Ryan. It's very
Yes.
hard to give them Ryan's information and get them to contact Ryan. So that's an important step. Something that I've found success in is starting group chats. I had heard it
Yes.
from Christine in Idaho, and it is now my new love language of I'm going to introduce you. I'll start a group chat with all 4 of us in that. But yeah.
Yeah, Jake,
Yes.
that's awesome. Thank you for saying that. I forgot to mention that portion. I've never had well, maybe 1 out of 10, where I've had an agent tell me, hey, I sent your information to these clients who are wanting to get pre-approved. Keep your eye on your phone. Like 1 out of 10 of those times do I actually get a call.
Yep. Yep. Thank you, Jake, for saying that. It's such a good point. That goes with your own referrals too. So if somebody says, oh, I gave your number to my friend, just say, hey, do you think they'd be offended if I called them? Because people just take the number, stick it in their pocket, and just do whatever they're going to do. But if we can have a little more control as agents or giving our lenders control to call them, we're way more likely to turn them into an actual client. So thank you, Jake. Yes. Make sure we're having them call the client. Okay, so then I just let them know the next step is touring homes. This is where I talk about, this is really where I talk about scheduling. This is where I set expectations. It's super easy for the public to think whenever they want to see a house that we just hop in our car and we meet them over there anytime, any day, no matter what. So I like to set the expectations. So here I say, I'm going to give you tools to look for the home. I'm going to set you up on, well, I actually would ask them, how do you like searching for homes? Have you started looking yet? And they're going to say, oh, yeah, I've been on this app. I really like it. Or, sometimes I go to KSL or whatever they say. I just say, okay, great. I have some really cool tools that I'd love to get you on. I do have an app that I'm going to send you. I'll text it to you and whoever, your spouse, your husband, whatever, text it over to them. And then I also set them up on my website directly. And I also set them up on the MLS. So as a client, so they can start receiving listing alerts. So I'm going to let them know that I have a lot of tools and we are all going to look together for their house. Sometimes people also think realtors' only job is to actually find them a house. So I set very clear expectations like, I'm going to set you up on all these tools. We're going to find the house that you want, and then we're going to go take a look at them. And then my job really begins when the house is found. That's another script that I like to use is my job begins once the house is found. Because right now it's super easy for people to find houses online and they really think, gosh, maybe I don't need an agent because I can do that myself. So setting clear expectations that we're all going to be looking for houses, we're going to be using all kinds of tools, and there's still a lot of work to be done once the house is found. The ways that I set expectations here is, so, based on your work schedule, when would be a good time for you to look at homes? Is it going to be better on the evenings? Is it better on the weekends? Do you have a day off during the week? Like, I'm really trying to figure out what day is going to be my Johnson day or whatever. What day is going to be the day for this family? And they're going to say, oh yeah, we'd much rather go on Saturdays. I'm like, okay, great. So Saturdays will be your day. So what I need from you guys is I need to know what homes you'd like to see on Saturday with a 24-hour notice. And the reason I'm saying 24-hour notice is because I don't want them to call me in the middle of the week, in the middle of the day and say, I want to see a house in 5 minutes. Because we do need to prepare them. But you also have to set the expectation. The reason we don't run and jump to houses or we can't show you in 5 minutes is technically we need a 24-hour notice because people work from home nowadays. People have dogs, people have children. We do have to schedule an appointment to get you into these homes. However, the general rule of thumb is a 24-hour notice, but I will do my very best to get you into this house as quickly as I can. So I'm really setting that expectation for me. Like if I'm at my child's birthday party or something, I don't want to drop everything I'm doing to run and show a house. So if I let them know up front, I'd like a 24-hour notice, but I'm going to get you in as soon as possible. It just comes across differently than to say, just let me know when you see a house you like and I'll run over there and show it to you. So you really want to control your schedule. And step number 3 is where I do that. And just, helping them understand that not everybody can get you in a house that quickly. The sellers live there. So just helping them understand that process. That's what I'm doing on step number 3. Then I also, during step number 3, I let them know like they can drive around, they can use the app, they can get information by driving around, they can go into open houses, and all of that's fine. I do want to set the expectation if they go into any kind of model home, I really should be with them. And the reason for this is a lot of builders, if you're not there for the first time or you haven't registered your client, there is a possibility you won't be able to help work with them. And so you just want to really set the expectation, give them a stack of your cards and say, if you ever go into an open house or if you ever stumble upon a model home and I'm not with you, just make sure they know that I'm your agent and give them my card. And then as quickly as you find out that they did that, we want to get a hold of the builders and make sure that they know, because we could lose that client if they go without us. And not always, but again, just set the expectation, I need to be with you. And if not, here's my card. Any questions on that one or thoughts? Kind of a tricky one, but very legit. Okay. So then I basically say we're going to set the schedule. We're going to go out. We're going to see homes. Once you find a home that you absolutely love, step number 4 is I'm going to ask you to put an offer in on the house right away. And I explained the market. So currently our market, we are entering spring market. A lot of properties are getting multiple offers again. So, you know, you may say to me, hey, I just want to sleep on it. We want to make a decision. We'll call you tomorrow. And that in today's market could actually have you lose a house. So I'm going to encourage you to write up a really good offer the second you find a home. And basically what that means is we are going to have to come up with the terms that you want to offer, like the price, your earnest money amount, dates, all of that. We're going to put that together in an offer. And don't worry, Mr. Buyer, for the most part, Utah's contracts are very buyer friendly. So if you change your mind, we're going to do inspections. We're going to go through all of that stuff. If you change your mind or can't get the loan, I can get you your earnest money back. So just keep that in mind. And that's why I'm going to encourage you to write an offer right away. Then the next step, we're going to write up that offer, and then we're moving to step number 5, which is where I'm going to begin negotiating for you. So I'm going to negotiate on your best interest to get you the best price that you want. I want to get the best days that we possibly can. I want to run some comparables and make sure you're not overpaying for the property. So I have a lot to negotiate. I need to figure out every seller's situation. Is the seller moving? Are they buying a new house? Do they need us to go fast? Do they need us to go slow? There's so many things that have to be negotiated up front, and that's what's going to happen right after you place the offer. Then once we go under contract, so negotiations and offer, you know, getting the offer under contract can take anywhere from 24 to 48 hours, depending on the seller's situations. So all along each one of these steps, I do want to give them time frames on how quickly things will be moving. So writing the offer and negotiating is going to take 24 to 48 hours. Then once we get under contract after the negotiations, we are going to need to put earnest money down. So you definitely want to make sure they know that they have to have earnest money in this transaction. The general rule of thumb on earnest money is 1% of the purchase price. And so I let them know up front, you know, 1% of the purchase price. And by this time, they may or may not know what their down payment's going to be. But I just help them understand that earnest money, we do put it up right up front. If you give me a check, it is going to be cashed, and then it's basically held there until either we perform on the contract and it will give you a credit at closing towards your closing costs, or if for some reason you decide to back out after all the dates and deadlines, which I'm really going to make sure that this doesn't happen. But there is a potential that if you were to cancel, but right before closing or something, you would lose that earnest money. So right here between offer and negotiate, I am talking about earnest money and making sure they understand what that means. Any questions on earnest money? Or anything at all?
Sorry, and that has to be deposited in the brokerage 3 days, or is it 4 calendar days?
It's within 4 calendar days.
4 days.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. And so I do let them know too, at the time that we write up the offer, I don't necessarily need earnest money that day. We are going to negotiate and go under contract, and then we'll have them submit their earnest money. So sometimes they're like, I don't have a check today, or I don't have the money today. I'm just like, no problem. We actually don't need it for those 4 days, and then we will deposit it.
Okay, and then I think Jake mentioned that there's like an app that you guys use or that we
Yes.
recommend.
Yeah, so through Command, we use the Earnest app. And so that basically is a way for us to send them a link, and they can just wire their funds in straight from their bank. Most banks and most credit unions affiliate with that app, and it is much easier. There is a $15.95 fee, I believe it is now, or $14.95. to wire that, but most banks are going to charge you that to wire money in anyway. So they could just do a check. They can drop off a check at one of the offices, or they can also submit it at the title company. But we would have to use another addendum to do that as well. So the earnest is my favorite way to do it. It's clean and easy.
Okay, and does that require an addendum or just the other? Okay,
No, when you write up the contract, I usually will write check or wire on how we're going to receive the earnest money, and that is a form of a wire.
okay. Sweet, and there's no cap on that. It could just be the 1% of,
Yeah. So the general rule is 1% of the sales price or the purchase price. But not everybody can do that, you know. So if we're doing say a $600,000 house, maybe they don't want to put $6,000 down. Everything's negotiable. That's just kind of a good guideline, is to get them to do a 1%. You know, I was helping somebody with a model, or not a model home, a mobile home, and it was 27,000. 1% in that scenario is not enough either. So it doesn't always work out to be 1%, but that's just kind of a good guideline.
okay. No, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Good questions.
Good to have communication. I had an experience where I was selling a townhome for 475 or something like that, and the earnest money was $1,000. Because that is all that the lady had in her name and was waiting on the close of their house to then it was a divorce situation. So if there isn't like a 1% you're receiving an offer, kind of those things, this is not about buyers, but just 1% is a general rule to explain, but it's not always the case.
Yeah, it's not always a case. So if we kind of flip over to the listing side just for a second, if we think about that. So when you're a listing agent and you're receiving earnest money or accepting earnest money, if you're accepting anything less than that 1%, really anything you're accepting, if the contract falls through, that's all your seller's going to get. So if it falls through and they come back to you and they're like, I really am only getting $1,000, they're probably going to be upset. But if you can explain to them, well, this thing is canceling and you're actually going to get $4,000, which is about 1%, it's a much easier conversation if the deal has to cancel. When we work with buyers, which we're talking about mostly tonight, we are going to be able to protect that earnest money to the best of our ability so they don't ever lose it. When you're working on the seller side, we want to make sure the seller is getting the most money if the deal cancels, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that does.
Definitely two sides to that coin. Okay, awesome. So then I basically, after I explained we're under contract, now we're going to really begin moving. So the next step is we're going to go to our home inspection. So during due diligence, this is basically your time to do anything you want to do to make sure that this is the house that you want. I recommend you hire a professional inspector, and depending on the inspections you want to do, you can do a normal home inspection, you could do a meth test, you could do a radon test, you could do a mold test. Like, there's so many things that they could do. So you definitely want to recommend that they hire a professional. Or I tell them, you know, if your husband's a plumber and your uncle's a contractor and you know you don't have to do a home inspection, we definitely recommend it. You can also bring your friends and family in to just do a walkthrough. You could just call a plumber to check out the plumbing. So they really can do anything they want during this inspection time frame. And so I just kind of let them know this is something, when you pay a third party, you are paying upfront out of pocket. So a home inspection can cost you anywhere from, I'd say, $400 to $2,000, depending on what you're doing. And just so you guys know, most people are going to do probably a meth test, a radon test, and a regular home inspection. And so that's probably like it's probably like $800, something like that. And so you do want to make them aware, and it's good to have relationships with inspectors so you know that exact number. The home inspector is not somebody that we necessarily hire. It's just somebody that the general public doesn't typically have relationships with. So it's always good to just be able to refer somebody to them. You can even say, oh, I'll handle it. I'll set it up. I'll get them on the schedule. And you are going to kind of facilitate that inspection. So they don't have to decide tonight when you're doing this buyer presentation. They don't have to decide right now if they're going to hire a home inspector. You're just recommending it and giving them an idea of the cost. Any questions on inspection? Okay. So and then as far as timelines, I do tell them the inspection is typically done within the first week of going under contract. So the quicker we move through this, the quicker you're going to know if it's the right home for you. We want to make sure the inspection gets passed because the next step is going to be the home appraisal. Now, the appraisal is something that is required and ordered from the lender, and it is something that typically is paid for from the buyer. Sometimes this can be put into their closing costs. Some lenders will have them just put a credit card on file. So if the home doesn't close, they have to still pay for that appraisal. But this is another probably around $600 cost to them if the home doesn't close, and sometimes upfront. Ryan, how do you guys handle the appraisals? I think he's driving now.
No, you're good. I'm here. So we we coordinate with the agent often when just depending on timelines and whatnot on when we need to order it, because we do collect it up front just because it's the appraisal management company that is charging, and they send a link directly to the borrower.
Okay.
So a lot of appraisal management companies have changed their procedures, and they won't even go out and do the appraisal until they have payment collected or estimated payment. So it's actually important that we work as a team on the lending and real estate side to know exactly when we should order that. And with that said, inspections being done swiftly is important.
Yes.
Because we ideally want to save them the cost of the appraisal if the property's in bad shape and we're going to cancel.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. So yeah, so that's definitely another expense that a buyer may or may not be aware of that they need to plan for. So right now you have earnest money, you have a home inspection, and now you have an appraisal. And if we don't sit down and do these buyer presentations with this, and you go out and you take a buyer out and you show them their dream home, they put it under contract, and then you're like, now I need your earnest money. Now I need you to pay for a home inspection. Now I need you to pay for an appraisal. They're probably going to freak out. So this is again, the best time to set up all these expectations and how to handle them.
Yeah. It's like another, 12, could be close to like $1,200, $1,000 between the two of them.
Yes.
So it's definitely not something you want to treat lightly, but luckily in our consultations, we actually include the cash to close with the appraisal being factored into it.
Oh, good.
So that they're kind of under the impression they're paying, but the inspection, that's one that we don't ever really discuss.
Yeah. Yeah. And we definitely tell them that they need to plan to pay the home inspector at the time of the inspection. So it's just helping them understand that, even on 100% financing and no money down and all of that, there are still costs associated with buying a home. So we just want to make sure there's no surprises there. So yeah, and then like Ryan was saying, the home inspection, we want to do it very quickly within like the first few days, the first week, because the next week we're going to be dealing with the appraisal and the loan approval. So we don't want to order the appraisal until we're through the inspection. So I let them know if there's any issue with inspection, we're going to need a couple days. I'm going to negotiate any repairs needed for you. We're going to do our best to make sure we can get them. If we can't get it taken care of, you can back out now and get your earnest money back. If you're happy and you want to move forward, the next step is the appraisal. Moving on to the loan approval. So this is when I tell them, start to finish, from the time that you see a home, the time that you go under contract until the time that our loan is approved is anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks. So during this time, I like to really reiterate anything you've done at step number 2 to get pre-qualified. You do not want to do anything with your financials without the lender knowing. So I don't want you to pay off any bills. I don't want you to buy any cars. I don't want you to go to RC Willey and buy any furniture. During this whole entire time, we do not want you to do anything with your credit, your finances, your job. And if you do or you need to, you have to talk to the lender first. And it's very important that we say this during this presentation and multiple times during the transaction, to be honest. I have several stories. One of my most recent ones, when we went and I told them I had this appointment with them, as I do every buyer, explain the whole process. I always tell people during this loan approval time, do not do anything with your credit. don't go buy anything, don't quit your job. I mean, I say it over and over and over. And my client, once we went under contract, in their mind, we were done. And they showed up to the home inspection in a brand new car. And it literally almost killed the entire deal. Like they had to return the car. It was just a bad deal. So you can say it during this time and say it even when you go under contract. Okay, now remember, we're entering the loan approval time now. Don't do anything with your credit unless the lender has approved it. Ryan, were you going to say something?
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. And unfortunately, you're not always going to be working with your lender or a good lender like our team. As braggy as that sounds. So it's actually really important for you to have that conversation, because there are some lenders out there who just won't. They just don't, for whatever reason. And so if they're not getting it from their lender and they haven't gotten it from you,
Does he sound like a robot?
that's threatening your paycheck and also their ability to buy their house.
Okay.
Do I
We
sound
didn't-
better?
Yes, you do now.
Does
We
it sound
missed
better?
about half of that. Yes.
Okay. Weird.
You
So
sounded like a robot, but basically what we heard is you're not always working with a great lender, and not everyone's going to tell you, tell them that.
Yes. So at that point, your paycheck is being threatened and the client's house and ability to buy their house is being threatened. So don't always rely on the lender, just because you never know. I mean, if you're working with someone you haven't worked with before, you don't know if that's a part of their process.
Yep. Yep. I love how you say that. We're all on the same team and we need to protect our clients and ourselves at the same time. So yes, very, very important loan approval process. So I tell them, this typically from finding the house to closing, you're looking at 30 to 45 days, depending on the situation. And again, during that time, don't do anything with your credit. Then the next step, once we receive your final loan approval, then we are going to begin moving and we are going to set up whatever we need to as far as movers are concerned. And we need to set up a closing. Now, what I don't like about number 9, that it says set up your movers, your date with your movers, you really want to make sure that the loan is 100% approved and you are ready with closing, because I've been to many closings where, and that doesn't happen a lot, so I don't want to scare you, but I have been to closings or close to closing where all of a sudden we need an extension on the loan. And then you have movers set up, and now the movers are going to charge them more and they can't come to the house because we haven't funded and recorded. So setting up movers can be a little bit tricky. So I do recommend that you do that like the very, very end. Like we know the loan's approved. We know the docs are at title. We're going to closing. We know the sellers are prepared to move out on time. And now we have the movers plan to move in. So
Hey, Terry,
really it's like packing. Yeah.
Question on that. So do you know, since you guys handle that a lot of the time, like would mover companies just put you on a list for like 3 days where you could tell them like settlement, but then you could have like a 3-day buffer essentially just to kind of take priority. And then when you have the official clear to close and the good from, I guess the clear from my side, we have docs generated at that point, you could finalize a time and day. Like do they do that?
That is a really good option. It really depends how busy the mover is. I've had movers that have said that like as long as you're within this window, it's okay. But if you fall anywhere 1 minute outside of the window, we're going to have to reschedule you. Or I've had people moving cross country where they literally, the movers paid them, wanted them to pay for hotel rooms. I've had some pretty sticky situations with movers, so it's really better to be safe than sorry. But that's a really good thing that's a great idea. Just call the movers and say, hey, I'd love to have like a 3-day window. Is that even possible? Just make it clear to your client that it's not as easy as going under contract and scheduling a mover. There's a lot that has to happen before we literally have their move-in date.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I guess with that said, just always double check on our side before you schedule the closing. Just because there's turn times, like you'll get if you're working with us, you'll get an automated email saying we're cleared to close. That doesn't necessarily mean you can close in an hour. We have a 24-hour turn time to get all the closing documents ready, the entire closing package, and coordinate everything with the title company as far as checks and balances and making sure fees are aligned and we're not overcharging, undercharging, missing anything. So even if we get that clear to close, it's always good to check with us on the lending side when we could actually sign before you schedule it.
Yes. Lots of communication through this whole process for sure. Making sure everyone's on the same page. And then I just let them know once we're ready and we have that clear to close, we are going to go to closing, which basically means we're going to go sign documents. However, all of that can still take another 24 to 48 hours before it funds and records into your name. So this is where it gets a little bit sticky too. And this is something just like, don't mess with your credit. These are expectations you have to repeat throughout the process multiple times, because they're going to say, oh, we're going to look at a calendar when we write the offer. And they're going to say, yeah, I want to close on April 29th. And then they're just going to assume 100% we're closing on April 29th. And that's not always the case. Sometimes we close sooner, sometimes we close later. That's kind of the intended date of closing, but that date is not always 100%. And it's definitely not 100% that they will have the keys on the 29th. So you want to make it very clear that we're going to go to closing, which it's typically called. We're going to settle all the documents and then it's sent back to the lender for final approval and funding and recording. So just setting clear expectations during this meeting is going to really help the whole thing go so much better. During the whole process, which is probably another class, it really just comes down to a lot of communication. You're communicating with the seller, you're communicating with the seller's agent. You could be communicating with some other agents if the seller's buying another house. So there's a lot of moving parts throughout this process. So it's so much easier if we can just set the expectation up front. And I literally tell my buyers, I'm like, this is a roller coaster ride. I'm going to be honest with you right up front, just like a roller coaster. 1 minute you're excited, you're in it. The next minute you wish you were out of it. I'm going to be here to get you through this and you're going to be super happy in the end. There will be problems. There will be speed bumps. But that's why when you work with an awesome team like myself and my team, we're going to make this as smooth and easy as possible for you. So any questions for you guys so far?
I just had one for the loan approval process. How long is that good for? Like, let's say that I'm working with somebody for 6 months and we don't find a home. Do they have to get pre-approved again?
That is a really good question. I'm going to let Ryan answer it.
Yeah, really good one. So if we have a hard credit inquiry or credit report, it's good for 120 days. The client needs to close before that 120th day. If the credit for whatever reason expires, I mean, it doesn't happen often that we're fully, pre-approved and we're out shopping, putting in offers and you end up expiring. But in the event that it does, it's super easy at that point just to update credit, update some documents, which we would have already had done within that 120-day timeline anyways. So once they get the majority of it out of the way, just by starting the pre-approval process, from there, updating it is really just kind of a couple clicks and a couple updated documentation. That's about it. So it's super easy to update.
Sweet. No, thank you.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, so now at this point in the presentation, I hope you guys feel it with me going through this. You can really see the real estate agent, right? Just spending all this time on this one page, helping them understand the process. So if you remember the feeling of step number 1, when I said, okay, you're going to hire an agent, I'm going to ask you to sign a contract. It's a very different feeling than when you get to step 10. And you basically have said, now we're at the end, everything's great. It's been a roller coaster ride. We're going to get you your favorite, your dream home. And now I say, okay, do you have any questions? And they may or may not. A lot of times they don't. And then I just say, okay, do you feel comfortable hiring me and my team as your agent? And just be quiet and let them answer. And I literally, I would say, I want to say I'm 10 out of 10 on this, but I won't say that it's that good. I'll say 9 out of 10. 9 out of 10 times when I do a buyer presentation, I do the whole presentation just like I did with you guys. At the end, I say, okay, do you feel comfortable hiring me and my team to help you? They always say yes. They're like, absolutely, let's move forward. And then I refer back to, okay, remember how I said that according to Utah code, we have to have our agency in writing? Now I'm going to go over the agency documents with you. But once you've shown all of this value, it's super easy to get into the contracts, and they're less scary than if I were just to, somebody calls me and says, hey, I want to buy a house. I'm like, great, I'm going to DocuSign over this document. You need to hire me. Don't worry, I get paid 3% or whatever you're going to charge them. It's such a different feeling than if you can go through the whole value proposition, explain to them the whole process, how they need you, all the things they don't know. And then you're like, okay, do you want to hire me? It's so easy for them to say yes. Has anybody had that experience or anything opposite of this?
No, I was just gonna say, Terry, I love that because especially with the NAR situation coming up, like if you're actually providing value like this, I don't think you're gonna struggle, you know, and especially that commitment statement at the end. It's huge because you can get a verbal commitment to you, and then the contract is just super easy to throw a signature on it to make it official.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wish we had something like that.
You can make one, just copy it.
Oh, I'd go to prison, Terry.
Oh, you would? Okay. I don't know your regulations. I'll stay out of that.
Oh, no, it's all good.
Michelle, were you going to say something or had a question?
Yeah, and I was just gonna say I bought my first home about 7 years ago, and it would have been nice if the agent that I hired would have walked me through this, especially with the fees that came with it. Because yes, I knew there was a deposit for the earnest money, but I didn't know about the inspection, the appraisal, and then usually something happens between the inspection period where we had to hire, I believe, somebody to come test for mold in the house. So I had to pay for that. And so, knowing this up front would have been nice, and it would have been less stressful. And I would have budgeted better with my financing too. So
yes, I love that you're a real testament to that. And you can say that to your clients. Like, it's super important for me to be upfront and honest and help you understand the process, because when I purchased a home, I had no idea some of these things were going to happen. And it is an awful feeling. And when you're there, I don't know how you felt about your agent, but I'm sure in your mind a little bit, you were like, man, nobody told me I was going to have to pay for that. Man, nobody told me I was going to have to pay for this. And they just want to be frustrated with the agent. So if you can just clear all of that right up front, our jobs are so much easier.
yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I don't know about you, Terry, but just to be another testament to that, like that's a perfect sales script or tactic because it's so genuine and it's not just a script, right? You can literally refer back to your personal experience, and that's going to disarm them so much because they're like, oh, this person's human too. Like she also bought a house and she had this happen to her, which was negative, and now she's going to protect me from that.
Yep. I love that. Exactly. I think you have a really good objection handler if somebody doesn't want to meet with you. Right there, if they're just like, oh, I've bought a house before, I know what I'm doing. You could just say, I'd really like to sit down and share my process with you, because I've had my own personal experiences of a lot of surprises showing up, and I just want to make sure my clients have the best experience. So that's a really good objection handler too, being so authentic. So I love that. So that is my whole presentation, you guys. So that did take an hour for me to go through. And that is about how long, I guess we talked for a good 10 minutes, but that's about how long it takes for me to do a buyer presentation. So now at this point, I literally just go through the documents that I'm going to have them sign. So I will show you, if I get out of this presentation. There we go. So the rest of the packet, just so you know, it is pretty. It basically outlines everything I just said, why they want to hire us, our competitive advantage, who we are as Keller Williams. You can see I didn't go through any of this. I don't think they care who we are. They just want to know how we're going to help them. But that's what's left in this packet. I just give it to them. So I just say, you know, I'd like you to take, that way they have something to refer back to when they go home. But the rest of this stuff, you could, if you wanted, you could flip page by page. But I find I'm better organized if I stay on my one sheet and just explain it. But you guys can really study this book because this is everything I said tonight is in here. It's all in here. So study this, get really comfortable doing the presentation. But at this point, I would say, okay, so now are you feel comfortable hiring me? They're going to say yes. I do have these forms printed and with me. So I'm going to go through these really quick with you guys. The forms, again, are going to be on this checklist that is in your coaching PC materials. That's on there. And so the most important form really is going to be your buyer agency agreement. And so that is in here. I'm not going to go through it line by line, but I am going to just kind of highlight a few things for you. So you're going to need a buyer due diligence checklist. You're going to need the exclusive buyer broker agency disclosure. You're going to need the wire fraud. So you can type in these keywords. I type in wire, buyer broker, and then we do have like an affiliated ABA document that you would get signed as well if you can during this. When I'm meeting with a buyer, the most important ones and the ones that I have with me are these three. And then anything else I typically will DocuSign, but I do like to get these in writing with ink at that moment. So now we're going to open these up, create that packet. And mind you, I've already done all of this before I meet with the buyer. So the buyer due diligence, so I basically, and I'm going to explain it to you the exact way I explain it to them. I say, okay, and actually I go through the buyer agency first. So I'm going to go to that one first. So I just say, okay, so remember how at the beginning I said I was going to ask you to sign a contract. Now that you feel comfortable hiring me, let me explain what that is. So this basically says that you are hiring myself and Keller Williams to represent you as your agent. So we are going to go into a term, depending on how quickly they want to buy a house. I would recommend doing like no less than 90 days, and you could probably go up to like 18 months. But there's no date that you have to do on here. It really is, you know, how long you think you'll be in business with them. But don't cut yourself too short. Like 90 days is still very short to pick out a house, go under contract, get it to closing, not have a cancellation. So don't feel bad if you're doing 6 months or a year. Like you want to really protect your time with them. So I just say the term of the agreement, we are going to do this for 6 months. So it basically means we're going to work together for the next 6 months. When you close on a property, this contract is null and void. So as soon as they close on something, it's gone. Things for you to know as agents, this is actually the ending date. I see so many people put today's date right here, which means you've just canceled the contract the day you signed it. So make sure you put the date, the ending date. So this is most likely at this point going to be close to like a 2025 date. So just make sure that you're putting the right date there. I do explain, okay, so this is disclosing the brokerage fee. So this basically says, Mr. Buyer, that there is a brokerage fee in order to hire me. So typically Terry Scheitower, I charge 3%, and I also charge a $350 transaction or admin fee. And that is for my services to represent you as a buyer. So basically what this next one says is if we are purchasing a property through the MLS where somebody is offering to pay my commission, you will not be held responsible for that. We will be paid by them. If for some reason that they are not willing to pay our commission and we cannot negotiate it with them, then you would be responsible to pay that. So you just want to make sure that they understand, and where these documents have changed is they have put this in here as recently as I think it was the 5th of this month. Brokerage fees are not set by any board or association or MLS in any other manner, and commissions are completely negotiable. That's really like the newness that's coming out of the new UAR stuff. So it's just very important that you never tell a buyer that your services are free, because they're not. We are getting paid in the transaction. It's just a matter of who is going to pay it. Either the buyer's going to pay it or the seller's going to pay it. Any questions on that? You know, that's a hot topic right now. Awesome. Okay, so protection period, I typically put 1 month in here. And so I basically explained to them, and what I told somebody today is if you get really good at these bold words and kind of memorizing the first sentence of it, you'll be able to explain these contracts very easily. So this just basically says after 1 month of us terminating this agreement, if you've entered into a contract that basically I've helped you through, or because of my marketing efforts, you obtained a contract, then I may be entitled to a commission for up to 1 month after. Buyer representation and disclosures, I just say, you, Mr. Buyer, you are who you say you are. If you're part of any kind of a company, you have the right to sign on behalf of them. Agency relationship. So I go through this pretty quick. I am just reading these bullet points as I go through. So I really explained to them, okay, there are going to be different agents involved in this transaction. So there's going to be a buyer's agent, which I'm going to represent you as your buyer's agent. There's also going to be a seller's agent involved. And there could be what we call a limited agent. And that is where we represent both sides. Don't worry, Mr. Buyer, if that comes into effect, there's another contract I would have you guys sign, letting you know or disclosing that that is happening. Professional advice. So that I am trained, my company and myself are trained to market and sell real estate. We are not accountants. We are not attorneys. We are not home inspectors. So there's so many things that we are not. If you have questions outside of my professional expertise of buying and selling real estate, we want to make sure you get those questions answered by a professional in that industry. Dispute resolution, if we get into any kind of disputes over this agreement, we can choose to go to mediation first to try and handle any disputes. If we cannot handle it in mediation, then, and we do end up in court, our attorney fees are basically paid according to whatever happens in court. So according to how the judge deems it, whatever happens in court, we could be expected to pay our own attorney fees, or it could end up differently. Buyer's authorization. So this just says that you do authorize me to communicate with you for the purpose of selling real estate. I make a silly joke in here that says, if you're on the do not call list, you can't sue me. If, I'm not going to call you because my mom's selling Mary Kay or something. So put a little joke in there. Attachments, typically there are not any attachments. So you're going to mark are not. Equal housing, I just say we do not discriminate. We abide by all federal, state, and local fair housing laws. Electronic transmission and counterparts. And I say, Mr. Buyer, this is probably going to be one of the last things you sign with a pen with me. Everything else will be electronic. And this is just saying that that's okay. Due on sell clause, Mr. Buyer, typically it doesn't look like we're going to be doing a lease agreement or any kind of seller financing. This does not come into play unless we do one of those, some kind of transaction outside of our normal transaction where you're getting a loan. Entire agreement, which we include with our buyer due diligence check form, which we're going to go over next, our wire fraud agreement, which we're going to go over next. These are all considered one agreement. And then I say, and this agreement goes into effect the day that we sign it, which will be today. And I nod my head and I basically say, which will be today. And I'm picking up my pen. And then I say, do you have any questions? Most of the time they say no. And I turn the paper around and I say, okay, great. Can I get you to sign right here? Great, sign the date. And then I get it back, I turn it around and I sign it myself in front of them. So you will sign right here. And that way they can see that this is a contract. We're all going to work with each other. It's very bilateral. We're going to work together on this. We're all agreeing to it and we're all signing it. Any questions on this, you guys? Okay. And then after that, I just jump over here to the buyer due diligence. I go through this very quickly. I basically say this paragraph. So this is your buyer due diligence checklist. I say Utah is a buyer beware state. So we want to make sure that we do everything that you want in your due diligence to make sure that you're happy with the house. I literally do this exact thing. I say, we're not trained. Again, we're trained to market and sell real estate. We're not trained in building codes or zoning, rentals of properties, hazardous waste, radon gas. So basically anything on this document, if you would like to have anything checked by a professional, we want to hire professionals in those areas. So I don't read every single paragraph on here, just so you know. This is a 2-page document. I basically covered this. It just says we're market to train real estate. We're not attorneys. We're not builders. We're not home inspectors. So buyer, do your due diligence. Do you have any questions, Mr. Buyer? And then they say no. I say, great. I turn it around, have them sign it. And then the next form is the wire form, which is also very easy to explain. You're going to use these on buyers and sellers. So this just basically says, I do need to have you sign this wire fraud alert, letting you know that I am disclosing to you that wire fraud is on the rise. It's just happening all over the place. So I just want to let you know that you never want to trust anybody who's asking for money via email. You never want to send your bank accounts, credit card numbers. You just don't want to send anything to anybody. I will never ask you to wire anything, especially a very large amount. The title company is going to ask you, you will let them know the earnest money, you can wire that. That does come through a link. It's never going to come through an email. It's never going to come through somebody saying, hey, I need you to send me money. You always want to personally speak with somebody before you wire money. So you just want to be very clear on this and then have them sign that. See if there's any questions. And then that's basically all that I have them sign. So then I always leave my clients, whether it's buyers or sellers, I always say, great, I'm super excited to work with you. The next step is, so the next step, depending on where you're at with this, is most likely going to be, okay, remember I said I'm going to have Ryan give you a call tomorrow. We're going to get you pre-approved, and then I'm going to set you up on these tools, and we're going to go out shopping on Saturday as soon as we get the green light from Ryan. So something like that. I'm just letting them know the next step. And then I let them go. And now I have a new client. Any questions on the buyer presentation? Or thoughts or ideas?
That was super helpful. Thank you. I know I'll probably freak out when it comes down to it, but I'll reach out.
You got it. Practice it. Just practice, practice. Grab a friend, grab a spouse. Practice this presentation on other people.
Yeah.
That was great, Terry. Thank you.
You are welcome. Glad I could help. So let me know what other questions you guys have when it comes time to do it. But again, I can't say practice those contracts, practice your scripts, practice your marketing piece to get you through the presentation. It's the best way to prepare yourself because you will panic when it really happens. And it's going to happen. People are going to say yes to you. You're going to get these buyers.
Yes, hopefully soon.
Yes, it will be soon. Okay, you guys. Well, just as a reminder for the two of you on here, we are closed tomorrow. So that just means that we won't have a morning call. All the offices technically are closed, although you have access to them 24 hours a day. So we'll be back on Monday for our regular morning call and our regular training at 4 p.m. on Monday. I'm also available all weekend. So if you guys have anything that comes up, please reach out. Happy to help. Text me or call me.
Alrighty, sounds good. No, thank you. Thank you, guys.
Yes, thank you.
You have a great
Have
night,
a
Terry.
happy Easter.
You have a happy Easter
You
too.
too.
You too,
Okay,
Ryan.
bye, you guys.